I am a two-time cancer survivor. I am a stage 4 endometriosis warrior, and as much as I hate admitting it, I'm a humanitarian. And I too am a sex worker. Sex work has saved my life. It has allowed me to be victorious over insurmountable odds, as well as support my family in humanitarian work. I was only 4 years old when I was kidnapped and trafficked by the state. Most states receive around $100 million in federal money every year, not including bonuses, to remove Native American children from their families. Now that's quite an incentive to destroy Native families and lives. No wonder we have over 5,700 cases of missing, murdered Indigenous women in this state, like this country alone. I could have easily been one of the missing, murdered Indigenous, because the home I was placed in when I was forcefully ripped from my family at 4 years old did not consider me a child, let alone a human being. I was considered merchandise. However, with every time I was raped, with every time I was restrained so grown men could have sex with me, with every beating, it only reaffirmed my resistance to colonization. I know that what I said might be triggering for some, but I'd like to let you know I've put in a lot of work to heal myself and reclaim my culture. Sorry, got a little lost here. But I'm so much more than okay. I'm thriving. It does pain me knowing how many humans are going through a similar experience at the border to what I went through when the state had kidnapped me. It's almost as if European Americans have forgotten they too were immigrants. Since I just talked about the state trafficking me, let me talk about sex work, because there's a huge difference between the two, and they should never, ever be conflated with each other. After graduating high school at 16 and continuing my education, I got married at 19 to my now ex-husband. This is where it gets a bit complicated, because shortly after I got married, I was diagnosed with cancer on top of all the endometriosis complications. My ex-husband wasn't the most supportive due to my declining health. I could no longer work the job, the career that I loved. And we had Kaiser Permanente at the time, but I was still having to put medical bills on credit cards. Before I knew it, I was thousands in debt and unable to open a checking account on my own. My ex-husband had become abusive by this time, and I had to escape. My options were very limited at the time. I didn't have family or friends to help me. I don't know how many of you have ever gone or stayed at a woman's shelter, but the first and last time I went to one, I was sexually assaulted by a female guard. So I chose sex work to help myself. It proved to be a wise decision, as I was able to save the money I needed to get out of my marriage, pay my cancer bills, and create the stability I needed to start fresh. More positive things came from this decision. I was able to sponsor myself when I was training to go pro in mixed martial arts, although this was cut short by a second cancer diagnosis. Thankfully, I had sex work to be able to pay for cancer treatment because Blue Cross Blue Shield dropped me. There wasn't Obamacare. I'm able to stand in front of you today because sex work literally saved my life and still continues to save my life because I'm able to pay for my medical care. This country profits off the sick and protects big pharma. Endometriosis has no cure, and I'm often forced to travel to other countries for my health care. I am not a criminal, but bad and unjust laws turn good, law-abiding citizens into criminals. I cannot understand the logic that something free turns into a crime when you add the equation of money. Maybe if they were paying everyone living wages. How is it? We live in a city where swinger clubs are legal, yet BDSM dungeons are illegal. I know Jill Tolles didn't consider families like mine with the creation of AB 166, a bill so undefined it criminalizes the children of sex workers. Unfortunately, we seem to be a nation with amnesia because we forget it was sex workers and cattlemen who created the West, or that sex work was legal in this country till around 1915. It was only when a group of white privileged women calling themselves feminists had a problem with sex work that it became illegal. The thing I don't understand is even when people leave sex work for other professions, they are still discriminated against. We should also be supporting sex workers who choose to go into other professions. They're human too. So here we are now, 2019. You don't like sex work, fine. But how can you not support people when they leave sex work? Hey, they're not doing sex work. It's one less sex worker to be oh so fucking concerned about. Love you too. These same people would still be up in arms if we were all living in homeless encampments on the street. Conquer and divide has been happening for way too long, even now among sex workers, and it's egocentric bullshit. Let's start using our critical thinking skills and move away from despotism. Now more than ever, we all need to be united and stand strong together. We can do this. We need to be having more open conversations on sex work and decriminalization. These anti-sex work bills are not for the greater good. They're not good for anybody. Sex worker rights are human rights. People of color rights. LGBTQIA rights. Sex worker rights are women's rights. And thank you. That's all I could say, but I love you all. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Last year, at this time, it was 3 people. Me, Anna, and Rebel. And we have grown in numbers, and I thank each and every one of you that have worked tirelessly this entire year fighting, showing up to meetings, making beautiful signs, working in legislation, and every other corner that you possibly can to make our lives better. And I also want to reach out to everyone and say that please join us. Everybody is welcome at these meetings, and we would love to see new faces. And our next speaker is Chelsea. Everybody give a round of applause for her.
Yes, baby! Hey, it's about to get even more exciting in here. Hello, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Chelsea, and you all look amazing, and I love the sense of community. This is my first time experiencing this kind of community in sex work, and I absolutely love it. I feel so welcome, and I love all of you for being here. I am, my term for myself is a hoe. It never was offensive for me. I always went by hoe. So, I'm a hoe. I've been in the industry since 2006. I started off at 16 years old. I had recently been kicked out of my house after an abusive childhood and right after my parents' divorce. So I was on the streets having to steal for everything. I mean, toothbrush, tampons, all of it. Either that or beg for money. And eventually, a friend of mine and I were doing our normal hitchhiking routine, and a man in a white Yukon with far too much cologne on started asking us if we'd heard of Craigslist and if we wanted to make some money. So of course, yes, I want to make some money. I want some food. I want a place to sleep at night. And so that's how it started. I saw him another time, and it was just hand stuff at that point. That's how I broke into it. Hand stuff with the white Yukon guy. And that was it for me at that point. I didn't get back into it until I was 19. I was going to a junior college and ran into some guy at the college who he got me right away. Started complimenting me on my intelligence, which was the first time anybody had complimented me on anything other than my looks in a long time. So of course that caught my eye. And about 3 days into it, he started telling me that he wanted me to work for him. And for him, that meant that I needed to be a hoe. On the internet, I even asked if I could work at a burger place and just give him my money for that. But that wasn't okay. No, I had to be hoeing for him. So that was how I got into sex trafficking. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time. It wasn't until actually recently that I identified that what I went through was sex trafficking. I started off on the internet. My Red Book, for anybody who knows the Bay Area, my Red Book.
Bay Area.
Craigslist was still down from the CLK at that point, so that's why no Craigslist at the time. It was just my Red Book. Again, started off with hand stuff. I was a little too shy to do full service for the time being. And I wasn't sure about it at all. I didn't enjoy my experience at 16. I felt a lot of shame about it. And I still continued to feel that way. I also was afraid of my pimp. And even at the beginning, tried to escape multiple times. He would threaten me with exposure. He would threaten to have someone beat up my mom. And that's what really did it for me. I couldn't have anything happen to my mom over me. So I stayed with him. And about, not quite a year into it, we got shot. And that was a really poignant time for me, for multiple reasons. One being that because I had been shot, my family essentially disowned me. Everyone except for my mother, who maintained contact with me, but it was limited at that point. My friends stopped talking to me. The few who I had kept, stopped talking to me. And so I really felt alone. I felt like this pimp and his community was all I had. I also felt like I belonged to this life now. What I called the underground at the time. In addition to that, the investigating officers were more concerned with what they had found on my phone, which they had confiscated, their excuse being because I used that phone to dial 911 to call the ambulance, and found evidence of my escorting. So they were more concerned about trying to pin me down for escorting than about finding out who had shot me and my friend. So that told me that I wasn't worth being protected. I wasn't worth being safe. And what I was doing was criminal. I wasn't a victim of sex trafficking. I was a criminal. So that just led me to believe that that was the life for me. And from that point on, I was all in. Full service, all of it. I stayed on the internet for a few years. Things got really bad. I was fighting clients on the daily, having to fight off grown men who came in acting all charming because they were thinking they were going to get what they wanted to get and realized it was my rules and didn't want to play by my rules. So eventually I decided I was done being at risk on a daily basis. And I ended up going to a brothel. Let me tell you what, that brothel life was definitely a step up from the escorting life for me. Not only did I have some safety in the legality of it, but I wasn't having to fight clients off. I wasn't having to deal with my pimp and all his friends who he had around and all the guns and violence that I was constantly having to deal with on a daily basis. At least while I was at work, I got a break from that. And on top of that, my money went up considerably. I was able to completely change my life. I went from small town with no opportunity to having a fly condo, multiple cars, and an office in Hollywood, and starting a record label. Unfortunately, I was still with my pimp, and he was still running things. And he didn't know how to run things at all. He was not good with money management. He was an alcoholic. He was also a sex addict. I was raped frequently, coerced into doing sexual acts with his friends for free. Counterintuitive, right? Also, having to be in charge of other women as I was his bottom bitch, which I wasn't okay with on multiple levels. I had fallen in love with my pimp. I didn't want to see other women having sex with him. I also didn't feel right about the fact that I was essentially selling these women. And of course he had gotten into my head. I felt like I was his partner in crime. I was his number two. Again, I didn't feel like I was a victim. I felt like I was a criminal. And there was no point where I felt like I could reach out. There was no point where I felt like I could have help. I just tried to make the best out of a bad situation. And that continued on for a couple years. And eventually I realized that things were not going to change. And it took a lot of planning. I decided to leave my pimp in January of 2014. I came up with a plan, executed it, finally left in May of 2014. So I've recently hit 5 years of escaping my pimp. Thank you. Now I wasn't done with sex work at that point. I continued working at the brothel. I moved to Las Vegas, however, so I could get away and escape, and left everything behind. Everything. My cars, my furniture, my office, all of it. Packed all my stuff in as much as I could into 3 suitcases and dipped. Made sure that I followed the rules, didn't involve other people because I didn't want other people to be in my drama. I didn't want other people to get hurt by something that I was trying to escape. And I didn't want him to have cause to chase after me, as he had done all the other times I tried to escape in the past. Finally, being away and being able to have my money be my money felt a lot better. However, the damage had been done, and I didn't have anybody I could talk to about it. I didn't even have this sense of community, didn't exist in the brothels. I didn't even tell them that I had a pimp when I did. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through. And I certainly couldn't reach out to people outside of the industry. When I decided to leave, to do something different, I was met with a whole other set of challenges. How do I function in the real world as a hoe? I have to live a completely separate life. I have to keep everything in the dark. I have to hide this part of me. the shame was so profound. It was overwhelming. It wasn't until recently that I was even able to speak about it to anybody. Trying to find a job? That was absolutely ridiculous. It didn't matter that I had legally worked at a brothel for over 4 years consistently, been top booker, and documented. It didn't matter. I can't put that on a resume or an application. Nobody's interested in that. I can't explain away this gap of employment, so I couldn't get a job. So it still ended up being me working for myself, trying to find ways to make it happen. And I am still in the sex industry. I have not gotten out yet. It is my desire to leave and to do something else, but unfortunately the stigma exists. The stigma covers everything. The stigma keeps me in the dark. The stigma keeps me from being human. And that's what I would say that I need more than anything else, is my humanity back. Being trafficked, I'm property, not a person. I'm a product. And I have not been able to reintegrate into society because society doesn't want me. Because they see this scarlet letter. Because I'm a hoe, they don't want me to be a part of them. I need community. I need to be able to talk about what I'm going through.